In this video, we're going to take a look at a green ink by KWZ, their green number 3. Now, as always, there's timestamps down below so you can skip around, but if you've got the time, I'd appreciate you checking out the entire video. Also, down in the description is a link to the green ink playlist, so if you wanted to see more greens, you can find them there. I'm an ink guy, and let's get into the first writing sample done on 90 GSM Clairfontaine. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade. The extra fine is lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, some spots of some shading like the K in quick is darker, the O in over is a little lighter. 17 seconds to dry. Medium is just a little bit lighter than the stub, darker than the extra fine. It has no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 23 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show no color variation, although there are some spots of difference in the extra fine, and a smear test you could recover if you smeared while you were writing. To have a range of experience with this ink, all of the writing samples are done with a Jinhao 159 with a 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a medium, and a Jinhao X750 with an extra fine. Then a Pelikan M805 with a broad nib was inked up, used for a day, and used to take the notes for this video. The next writing sample is done on 52 GSM Tomoe River. No bleeding, some minor ghosting going on. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is much lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, and 25 seconds to dry. Medium is darker than the extra fine, not as dark as the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen. It does show some tone variation. When you're looking at quick, it starts a little lighter and gets darker, but for the most part, the writing is much darker than the extra fine. 34 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby for both show no color variation, and we only saw the one spot in the medium. In the smear test, you could not recover if you smeared while you were writing. I agree with Vita. There's a lot to learn by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. A line of ink is put down, and then it's put into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And we see this gray tone at the bottom that's moving rather uniformly up. It comes up and we get a very nice green and a dark blue at the top. The one on the right is let dry for 10 minutes. And the most noticeable thing about it is that gray line on the bottom is really forming a line bonding with the paper, showing that it might be a little bit more of a permanent aspect to this ink. The next writing sample is done on 80 GSM Rhodia dot pad. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, spots of shading like lazy starts darker and gets lighter. The is darker than what's around it, 19 seconds to dry. Medium is the same tone as the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 26 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show no color variation, and we only got a little bit in the extra fine, and a smear test you could recover if you smeared while you were writing. Resistance tests are done to see how this can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it may be to clean from your pen. The smear is allowed to dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, it's the lowercase h, immediately draws my attention. Now, most of it did fairly well, but the fact that it's blowing out in the lowercase h means I probably would not use it in note-taking if I need to go back and highlight. Now, water is reactivating and lifting most of the ink, but not all of the ink, but it is all that it took to get it out of my pen. Pen flush is doing a little bit more than water is. Around the very edges of where you see the pen flush, you start to see some of the white of the paper coming through. Again, I didn't need it. The 1/3 bleach solution is completely removing it from the paper. The next writing sample is done on life paper. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade. The extra fine is lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, only little bits of shading, like the very beginning of brown is a little darker, the very end of over is a little darker, 16 seconds to dry. Medium is much darker than the extra fine, not as dark as the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade, and 22 seconds to dry. Scrubby for both show no color variation, and we're not getting it. In the smear test, you could recover if you smeared while you were writing. For the inks tested, the average viscosity was 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. KWZ's green number 3 has a viscosity of 2.04, making it just a little bit wetter than normal. If you're interested in how the viscosity tests are done and all of that stuff, there's a link to that video down in the description. Now, let's take a look at the next writing sample done on Levenger paper. No bleeding and no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo sheen, or shade. The extra fine is lighter than the stub with no feather, spread, halo sheen, no shade, and 11 seconds to dry. Medium is the same tone as the stub with no feather, spread, halo sheen, or shade, and 15 seconds to dry. Both scrubbies show no color variation, we're not getting it, and a smear test you could recover if you smeared while you were writing. For the inks tested, the average dry time was 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. KWZ's green number 3 has an average dry time of 24 seconds, meaning it takes just a little bit longer than normal to dry. The last writing sample is done on Franklin Christoph paper. Now we see a couple of spots that it's bled a little heavy in at the top in the stub. It didn't come through and touch the back of the page. And on the extra fine and the medium, we don't see any bleeding or ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo sheen, no shade. The extra fine is quite a bit lighter than the stub with no feather, spread, halo sheen. It does shade. Look at how dark the ends. It starts light, gets dark. Over starts light, gets dark. The starts light, gets dark. Very nice shading here. 10 seconds to dry. Medium is dark like the stub with no feather, spread, halo sheen, no shade, 14 seconds to dry. Scrubby for both show no color variation, and we're not getting it in the medium, but we are in the extra fine. And the smear test you could recover if you smeared while you were writing. Instead of finding inks that look like KWZ green number 3, I'd prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. I went with a black ink by Sailor, their Kiwa Guro. If you'd prefer a different complement color, then down in the description are links to those playlists. So what do I think of KWZ's green number 3? A great green tone that unfortunately offers very little, if any, shading. As a tone, this may be the nicest green from KWZ. I like it, but the lack of standout shading will get me to pass on having a bottle of it. So what nib and pen will give the best writing experience with this ink? If you want its much darker tone, then you really want to use a wet pen, and it does make a very nice dark green. For me, I'd prefer its medium tone that's available from a medium to dry pen with a medium or fine nib. I hope you got something out of this video, and in the next video, we're going to take a look at Roher and Klinger's Morinda.